What is going on? No horsing around family. Zach Boyd back at it again, talking NFL draft. And the guys to do that, I thought it'd be so cool. Never had them on here. Have wanted to have them on here for a while. And I thought, you know what the hell? I'm going to ask Landon Oliver over at the Blue Stable. Does a great job chopping up video. Actually, he's been doing that all night long. So it's going to be a great show for you guys as we talk about quarterbacks. It'll be quarterback centric, but you know what? If we want to talk about some other things, that'll be great too, as far as that goes. But Landon, man, thank you so much for hopping on and joining in here.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. And like you said, I've had a little bit of a free night tonight, so I've been grinding more tape. That's generally, my passion. It's what I love to do. So been grinding some tape on some prospects. But, even if we get outside the scope of quarterbacks, I love just to talk ball with everybody. So appreciate the opportunity to come on. Honored that you asked and ready to get to it, man. Appreciate it.
Let's do it, man. Let's just dive right in. So let's just talk current state of events right now, okay? We're 7. Obviously, we've got several teams ahead of us. A lot of teams right now, if it shook out this way, would be teams that wouldn't necessarily need quarterbacks, right? So that's probably going to start this crazy trend of teams trying to jump over the top of each other to go out and get those quarterbacks. I'm under the consensus that Bryce Young is the best quarterback in this class. I think he will be taken with the first pick. But I'm interested to know your thoughts as far as that goes. I know I think I know that you're a Levis fan when it comes down to it. I'm pretty sure that you're Team Levis. If you're the Texans right there at 1, are you going to take Bryce Young, or is there really going to be a strong debate over who they're going to take? Either, maybe somebody else. I don't know, but I would think it would be Levis or Young if it comes down to making a decision there.
Yeah. I do like Will. He's not my quarterback 1, but I am a Levis fan. I do believe very strongly in him. But yeah, Bryce Young to me is my favorite quarterback in this draft. I don't think it's honestly particularly close, especially when you put on the tape. I mean, it's just the stuff that he can do, is pretty special stuff. But it goes back to the old saying, I know there was a thing the other day, video, and they were asking, a guy was talking to a scout, and he said, how many quarterbacks in the NFL right now look like Bryce Young? Not that many. How many look like Will Levis? Most of them. Yeah. So, yeah, that's it's an interesting thing as we get closer. Once the combine starts, the Senior Bowl is going to be a big day for some of these guys as well. Excited to get down there to Mobile here in a couple months. I should be down there as well. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the discourse on some of these guys, because to me, based on tape and everything, Bryce Young is, like I said, clearly the number 1 guy. But then you get into the measurables of these guys and the arm strength and not necessarily the intangibles, but, what these guys look like in shorts. And it's a whole new ballgame at that point. CJ Stroud's a bigger dude, 6'3", probably pushing, 220 or so. Will Levis, of course. Anthony Richardson's like 6'4", 232, I think, last time he was measured. So these are all, big, strong guys. Levis and Richardson have massive arms. I mean, like cannons. And Bryce Young he can't physically measure up to those guys. But every other part of him is borderline elite. Like I was talking to somebody tonight. I said, look, man, if you put Bryce Young in the body of Anthony Richardson, we're not even talking about quarterback 1 in this class. He's probably the best quarterback I've scouted since Andrew Luck, if he had that body type. And that's high praise coming from me, because I'm pretty rough grader. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where the Texans go. There has been some chatter over the last couple of days about Stroud and Levis possibly sneaking up into that first overall spot. I know the Carolina Panthers are really big on Will Levis. They are enamored by him. So, getting ahead of them this past week was a big deal. And we'll see if that, stays like that. Possibly you might have to move up. But even if they're picking from the 7th spot, man, like if you believe strongly enough that a guy can be your franchise guy, you go get him. You go get him regardless. So that's just kind of my thoughts.
I 100% agree. And let's just kind of stay. I mean, when you want to talk about Bryce Young, I mean, if we're not talking about, and you can't avoid it because it is real, if we're not talking about his stature, I mean, it's not even in my mind, it's not even a debate. I mean, it is so far. I mean, the gap between him and the next guy. I mean, and I said it last night on our live stream with Steven. I said the one thing that is so damn impressive about him is the more chaotic that pocket gets, the more almost the more accurate he gets in like some strange weird way. It's like this guy is a psychopath. Like, I mean, like he is out here just dicing teams up. It's not been the most talented Alabama receiving core either. You know, when it comes down to it, he's just making plays, and he's a playmaker. I get the argument that they're going to talk about, obviously he's not Kyler Murray because he doesn't have that thick frame. He's not as sturdy built.
He's a thin dude.
But my gosh, man, I mean, if I'm the Colts, and for some ungodly reason the Texans say, you know what, we're just going to pull the plug and we're going to go with Levis. We like him. He's our guy. If I'm the Colts, I mean, I am giving up almost everything that I possibly can give up to go out and get a guy like a Bryce Young when it comes down to it. He's special, man. I mean, he is special, and I think he'll be special in the NFL. And there's going to be a lot of lying going on. There's going to be a lot of teams trying to put it out there and really knock down Bryce Young with his height and his weight. You're going to hear a lot of misinformation because they're not going to want the Texans to take Bryce Young with that first pick.
As a Colts fan, I mean, I don't want the Texans to take Bryce Young.
Exactly. I mean, it would be awesome if we got a chance, to sneak in there. Let's talk about Levis for a second, like in depth. What do you see when you turn the tape on? What do you like? What do you not like?
Well, what I like, first of all, is the fact that he's comfortable running a pro-style offense. He's under center a lot. He's used to dealing with certain cadences, certain protection calls, certain, adjustments at the line of scrimmage, and, pre-snap reads that a lot of guys aren't. I mean, that's a huge learning curve for a lot of prospects whenever they get into the league, and that's something that he's already used to doing. So, first off, I love the type of offense he runs, but then you get into really what makes him special, and that's his arm. I mean, it's one of those arms that, and it's different when you see it in person too. Like, I mean, it's one thing to watch it on film, but when you see it in person, and luckily, I've had that opportunity to see him throw, and I mean, it just pops. Like, it is wild to watch the ball come off his arm, and even with a quick release as well.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I know you didn't see a lot of it this year due to the turf toe injury, and he's banged up a lot, and offensive line was not that great, but yeah, he is a mobile guy. He is able to get out on the run. Very physical runner. He doesn't avoid contact very much, which that's something he's going to have to learn at the next level to preserve himself. But yeah, he's a very physical runner. Loves to get downhill. Loves to power through contact and stuff like that. So that's always a good thing to see because you want a mobile guy, especially with the way the league is trending nowadays. And really, I mean, there's just so much to like, I guess, from a physical standpoint. Now, does that always translate to film? No, it doesn't, unfortunately for him. And he was dealing with some extenuating circumstances this year, which really kind of made it difficult. But when you go back to last year's tape, whenever, he had some more talent around him, it really, he really did pop, and the numbers aren't eye-popping. I mean, you're not going to be blown away from the stats just because of the type of offense they run. Very run-heavy, very ball control, throw a lot of screens, that type of stuff. They don't take a lot of shots down the field and in the middle of the field just by designing the offense. So you're not going to see these guys, like Hendon Hooker and C.J. Stroud, who are playing in this spread offense, where they're chucking the ball, 3 or 4 wide receivers, every play. That's just not the type of offense Kentucky runs. So you're not going to get those eye-popping numbers. But you do see a lot of eye-popping throws. And it kind of makes you think like, well, hey, if he was playing in one of these offenses like a guy like C.J. Stroud or, Hendon Hooker or some of these other cats, who's to say, he would probably, his numbers would probably look a hell of a lot better. Yeah. So I think that's part of it as well. And then as far as what I don't like, I mean, there's really hangups with a lot of these guys, notably for Levis. His decision-making can kind of get a little cloudy sometimes. He forces the ball into places he shouldn't force the ball into, and that's just because he believes in his arm so much. You know, he can fit the ball anywhere on the field. So having that belief, he tries to do that, and he gets caught with some bad turnovers pretty often with that. And his lower half is really kind of not in sync with his upper half as much. So his upper body mechanics, I think, are really good. You know, he's got a nice, tight, quick release, good spiral, ball flies off of his hands, but he does struggle a bit when it comes to accuracy from the aspect of, you know, lower body getting lined up, you know, footwork being in sync. You know, that's something that really a lot of guys struggle with coming out. So that's not anything to me that's like a major thing, because almost every prospect coming out of the draft has footwork issues that need to be cleaned up. But, his are a little bit further to go, and I think that's something. If you get him with a proper coaching staff and a good quarterback coach can get cleaned up, really the main concern to me is just the decision making, and that's just, you know, it's something that maybe, you know, like I said, it's almost like the forest through the trees with Will Levis. So, you know, he's had multiple coordinators now. He's played in a new offense 3 years in a row where he's had to learn a new offense. And that's not easy for a young guy to do. And, you know, then he had the injuries. There were parts of this year that he wasn't even practicing during the week. And whenever you're trying to learn a new offense and you're not even practicing during the week, I don't know, you know, what fans expect, you know, on Saturday, but you saw a lot of those issues kind of pop up. And, you know, they're throwing to all new guys as well. You know, he had, I think, 3 freshman wide receivers, a freshman tight end. I mean, these are all guys that were learning the system along with him, and you're not getting those in-week reps. It just kind of, you know, and I think that's where the discourse comes from between scouts and between fans. And because fans, you know, they watch the games and they see these box scores and they see, you know, the Tennessee game and, you know, 98 yards and 3 interceptions. And you're like, this guy stinks. Like, how in the world does this happen? But when you talk to scouts who have this kind of information, who have talked to people from Kentucky, who kind of know the way things generally translate to the league, that's why you see so many people high on him. So that's just kind of my views on him. I think he does, like, I don't see the Josh Allen stuff. And like, I hate comparing people to Josh Allen. It's just
pretty unfair, huh?
It's extremely unfair. And to me, he really seems, which I don't like making comparisons at all, really, because like a prospect's, you know, that's a prospect. Like, I mean, you're not looking, you know, every guy's different. But to me, if there was one guy that I think he very closely mirrors in college, it was Matthew Stafford. That's kind of my comparison for him. And he's a little bit even more mobile than Stafford, but I think he's got that gunslinger mentality, the arm, you know, the quick release. And if he can clean up those lower body mechanics, I think he can see a lot of success in the league, but you're going to have to be patient.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, when I look at him, I mean, it's vastly different too. I mean, you mentioned being in 3 different offenses, you know, as well as, you know, he lost Wan'Dale Robinson, which was a huge target and a huge part of what they did, you know, in the year before. But like most young quarterbacks, the thing that really is the most concerning is when we get pressure and that pocket starts collapsing in that well, that those feet start going everywhere, right? Like those hips, and you're just like, you know, you're just spazzing out in that pocket because you're like, I got to do something. Well, I think sometimes when we talk about that decision-making process, what I see, at least when I look at it, is here's a guy who has one of the best arms that you'll ever have. I mean, it's a dream scenario. And what does a guy who has an arm like that do? They just throw that fastball, man. I mean, you know, they kind of revert out of that technique, out of all of that, you know, all of my skill set. Everything that you've learned kind of goes away in those moments because people are literally that close to, you know, to getting to you. And you think, you know what? I got the best arm in the country, man. I'm going to sling this ball out there. And I think that's where some of his decision-making really kind of breaks down. But that's the difference between the college game and the pro game. You know, a lot of these pro guys are going to look at him and say, I can fix that, man. I can fix all of that, you know, and I can surround him with the right people. because one thing that I can't teach is I can't teach a guy who's mobile like that, and I can't teach a guy who can literally throw the ball 75 yards in the air. I mean, he is the real deal when it comes to arm strength, and he can make the throws. It's not like, we'll talk about Anthony Richardson here in a second. Richardson's got a big arm, but it's not an accurate arm at this stage, in my opinion. From my evaluation and what I see, it's not as accurate. There's a real problem when people have these great arms. And a guy who I would use a little bit of a reference to is Jacob Eason, right? Like he never found a way to have touch with the football. He can throw the ball hard. He can throw the ball far. He can do all of that stuff, but just didn't have, that accuracy. I don't see that with Levis. I think Levis has a lot more to play with. I think you've got a lot more to like, and he's going to be a fun one, man, as it goes down the line. I think he's going to be in the conversation. It probably is not getting past 6, 7, 8. I don't even think he goes that far, if I'm being 100% honest. I think he's probably the second quarterback taken in this draft. But I mean, it's going to be fun to evaluate him. Let's transition over into an Ohio State guy, CJ Stroud. And I said it last night on the live stream, there's nobody in the country who has a bigger job interview than he does against Georgia, in the Final Four game. That game can rectify so many things for him. Yes. Or it can just cement what we've kind of all seen, when it comes down to it. We see a guy who, when you give him time, can absolutely make the throws. We've seen a guy under pressure who's not looked good, in those moments. He really struggles to just be accurate and to make good decisions. So just curious your thoughts initially. What are you seeing out of him? What do you like? What do you not like out of CJ?
Yeah, well, first off, like with CJ, so what I love is, one, the leadership quality he has for that team. I think he's a dynamite guy in the locker room and excuse me, stuff like that. But then, you get into the accuracy, you get into the ball placement, the touch, the ability to layer throws pretty much anywhere in the middle, to the edges. It's he can touch any field of grass. Now, he doesn't have the arm like Richardson or Levis where it just pops off of your arm, but he has the ability to get the ball wherever he needs to.
Good enough, though, right, Landon?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In your evaluation, I mean, it's definitely not that
no,
canon,
no,
but it's enough,
not,
right?
Yeah, it's not an issue for sure. But and I think what helps him too, with maybe not having that type of arm, is his anticipation is fantastic as well, and that's something that generally you don't have, or you don't learn whenever you get into the NFL. It's one of those, like, you either have it or you don't. And he has it in spades. Bryce Young has it. He throws some fantastic anticipation. Levis doesn't. That's one of the big knocks on him. And Richardson, he can, he has shown flashes of that. But sticking with CJ Stroud, what I don't like, of course, is obviously, you touched on it before. Whenever there's any sort of pressure, he doesn't have that ability to create, which is really what you're looking for in today's league. Everybody's chasing Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. They're chasing these type of guys because we've seen it be immensely successful. And if you can't do that, that's a knock on you. And, you're talking about 10, 15 years ago, CJ Stroud is by far, without question, the number one pick in the draft. But the way the league's transitioning now, if you don't have that ability, whenever things break down, play outside of structure, really create for your team and create for your offense, it's an uphill battle for you as a prospect. And I don't know if it's something, that wasn't necessarily asked of him at Ohio State, or if it's just something, he struggles with and can't do. Personally, just from going, and I've watched a lot of tape on CJ Stroud over the last few days, just trying to figure out that question myself. It's like, is this something that he has, or is this something that, maybe he wasn't asked to do, or is it just, it is what it is? And I've really kind of settled on the, it is what it is kind of a thing, where I don't think it's something he has in his tool bag. It's, and that's unfortunate because he does so many other things well. But I do think he's probably the guy that's likely to drop for me. And then on top of that, of course, you do have footwork issues with CJ Stroud. He's a little toesy. He has some hitches. He doesn't plant his foot into the ground and, really drive the ball. And I think that could also, if that gets cleaned up, can actually help his arm strength a little bit more as well. Like, even though it's not a problem, like I said, that could take it to kind of the next level if he can kind of learn to get off of his toes and really plant that back foot in and, flip those hips and deliver a strike. So I think he's a good prospect. I don't think he's the prospect we all thought coming into this year where, yeah, like you heard last year, I mean, it was like, oh, you got two can't miss guys, and that's Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I don't think CJ Stroud's a can't miss guy. I think if you put him in the right situation, he can be successful. But that's going to be the big thing for him is you can't ask him as your quarterback to create in your offense. You have to scheme the offense for him. So he's a guy that has paths to success, but it's not quite as, black and white as what we thought it was coming into the year.
No doubt about it. I mean, and to kind of piggyback off what you said, what I see when I watch his film, he's a little stiff for me. He just gets a little stiff and a little bottled up back there. Definitely can anticipate throws. That's one thing that stands out to me. He's also had the benefit of playing with a pretty damn good wide receiving core in college football. Two guys for sure going to be in the NFL, probably three if we're being honest.
That's something too, like to be said as well. Like for Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, for that matter, is outside of in Florida. You have the offensive guard. You have Osiris Torrance, who I think is a good guard prospect. But outside of that, who's getting drafted from that offense?
Yeah,
in the NFL, nobody.
Him.
In Kentucky, who's getting drafted from that whole team? Much less the offense. Nobody. They're not playing with NFL caliber guys on Saturdays. And CJ Stroud is playing with a number of NFL caliber guys.
Yeah. I mean, you know what CJ Stroud is to me, Landon, when I look at it? He's the guy that you go get when you missed out on the other ones. He's the guy that you say, oh my gosh, like we got to have a quarterback and we missed out on all of these other guys. I don't know how far he falls. It's really hard to gauge. It's so early in this process, and you're going to have guys that kind of go up and down, and they're just all around. I think probably when it's all said and done, I think Levis and Young probably stay pretty pat in that top 5 range. I don't think you're going to see a lot of fluctuation. Levis is going to absolutely blow up the combine. I mean, they're gonna freak out when they
Levis and Richardson both they're gonna shine in.
Yeah,
not only in shorts, but they're gonna shine in the interview process. These are two. And really, all of these guys will, to me, like they're all going to shine in the interview process. They're all great leaders, great workers, great, guys that you would want in your locker room leading your team. So I don't think that's a question with any of these guys.
Let's get into Richardson, because I know we've mentioned him a couple times. I don't know how you're going to feel. I'm interested, and this is one of my favorite parts about having you on. I really haven't had a chance to hear your perspective on Richardson, so it's not really going to be indicative of what I'm going to say about him, and I always like that because you always feel like, hey, you're not really holding anything back. So I'll go first when I see him. And so many things that you could look at and say, if that guy can replicate that on a consistent basis, you got yourself just an impressive quarterback. The arm's there. Obviously, he's a freak athlete. You worry about the starts in college. I think he's got 9 starts in college football. To me, he's inaccurate. I don't know at this point. I don't know how confident. I have to really dive in and chop it up. I don't know how confident I am that gets completely rectified. Will it get better? Yes, I believe 100%. You put him with some pro guys. You let him play longer. You get him in the right system. For me, he thrives in a system where you build the team around him. If you go out there and say, hey, I don't think he's a plug-in guy. I don't think you can just put him in any system and say, hey, just put him out there. We're just going to rely on his sheer athletic ability to go out there and make plays. I think you'd have to do a lot like what Baltimore did. And they said, you know what? We're going to get Lamar, but not only are we going to get Lamar, we're going to build our whole offense around Lamar Jackson to what he does really, really well, and hope over a long period of time he just gets better with that arm accuracy. Because the one thing about Richardson is he's got the ability to just carve you up over the top. Like if you settle on him and he gets outside of that structure and he throws that ball down the field and you're not protect, those safeties are not back far enough. I mean, he's going to throw that ball out there and let a wide receiver just run right underneath of it, because there's no doubt. You mentioned him and Levis as being just freaks at the combine. He's going to be the freak. You know, when he goes there, he's going to be the guy that every single one of them saying they're going to be flashing his 40 time up there. They're going to be flashing, you know, watching him throw, you know, those little highlight bits and everything. It's going to be special. For me, I would not take him over Levis. I would not take him over Young. I think the conversation starts after that. I think it's worthy to at least bring him in that breath. But for me, there's no way I take him over those two at this moment. You have the floor, Landon, man. What do you think about Anthony Richardson? I'm just a fan right now. I just want to hear what you think about this raw prospect.
Oh, well, did I appreciate it for sure. So Richardson was a guy, I think, you know, going into the year, I'd heard some stuff about him, like, hey, man, this kid's got a chance to really pop. And, you know, I watched the Utah game, and you're sitting there and you watch that first game of the season against Utah, and you're just like, oh, man, like, you're looking at, like, 1 overall type of a guy. And then, you know, the wheels kind of fell off there. But what really impressed me and why I am kind of bullish on a guy like Anthony Richardson is look at the improvement throughout the year. So over, you know, the first few weeks and in the middle of the season, he really struggled. But those last few weeks, man, he showed extreme growth. And what that tells me is, one, he can take coaching. He can execute the coaching that he takes, you know, whenever they get into the game. And he's a hard worker. Those are all really important prospects whenever you're looking at a guy. So that really kind of stood out to me, and it's like, okay, there is something here that we can work with. I think the biggest issue with him, to me, is just inexperience. This guy, he's only played in 13 games total. So, you know, it's one of those things, like, I hear a lot of the chatter of, you know, do you set him a year? Do you set him 2 years? All that. I don't think you do at all. I think you throw this dude in day one, kind of similar to what you said, like they did with Jalen Hurts. Or, you know, I know Hurts set, you know, behind Wentz, but the way that they built the offense around Hurts there in Philadelphia, and the way they did it with Lamar as well, which both of those guys set, you know, almost the majority of their first year, but I don't think you set him. I think you throw him in there and you build an offense around him and you let him get those reps. He needs those reps, because one thing, you know, with experience is you're not going to get experience holding a clipboard. I mean, you're just not. So to me, he's a guy day one that I would build the offense around. I would throw him out there and just, hey, like, go do your thing. Like, let's do this. Let's game plan for what you do well. Very similar to kind of what Chicago's done with Justin Fields while he's developing those great quarterback traits that he has. You're very similar doing that with Richardson. And I don't think Richardson's quite as raw as really what people think he is. Just going through the tape, you see a lot of stuff that translates to the NFL. He does have the ability to throw with anticipation whenever things, you know, are good. And he's much more inclined to be a pocket passer, which is kind of weird to think about. Because we see the freak runs and we see, you know, the speed and the ability like that, but he is much more of a pocket passer than what people think he is. He wants to stay in the pocket and throw, and he has that ability with his base. You know, he has flashes with, you know, his arm and his base and his decision making that you sit there and look and you're like, man, like, if you give this guy the right coaching staff that can build around him and the right personnel and that can be patient and let him grow, like, the sky's the limit for this dude. I don't think it's even close between his ceiling and anybody else in this class. And I think Bryce Young is special. I think he's a great kid. He just doesn't have that type of a ceiling. You're looking at all these guys and you're like, okay, in 5 years from now, if you were to tell me that this guy was a top 5 quarterback in the league, is it believable? CJ Stroud, probably not. I'm not going to think he's a top 5 quarterback in the league. Now, he might be like a top 10 guy, but I don't think he has that level of ceiling. Will Levis, is he going to be a top 10 or a top 5 quarterback in this league? I honestly don't see that. I think he's going to be a guy that you can win with and you can win big with, but I just don't see that level of prospect, and it doesn't show up on tape. And same thing with Bryce Young. Special dude, special thrower, special kid. I just don't think he has that type of an upside. Anthony Richardson, on the other hand, there's no doubt in my mind if that kid gets it right, and I don't know how long we have to hear that kind of discourse when we look at these guys, because we heard the same thing with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
We heard the same thing with Jalen Hurts. We've heard this thing multiple times over now where it's like, well, this guy's too raw. This guy's too raw. This guy's too raw. And they come in, and you're looking now at 2 MVP candidates, one MVP winner and one who's on pace. It's a race between him and Mahomes right now. But
probably going to get that MVP this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good shot of it for sure. And, I just don't know how many times we have to make this mistake and let guys like this slip whenever they're staring you in the face. And
yeah, I mean, he's going to be an acquired taste. I mean, I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be a handful of teams that are all in on him, like 100%. They would give up whatever, and then they're going to be teams that say, "Nah, he's not for me." But when I look at his film, man, it's that flick of the wrist, man. When he throws that football, I mean, it's just like that ball snaps out of there, man. I mean, I'm like, my gosh, there's no question, in my opinion, if you line every one of these quarterbacks up and they all were able to hit their ceiling in a perfect world, his ceiling's the highest. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he could be very, very special, but you just got to have the right system for him. You got to have the right coaching staff. You got to have the right players around them and see what you got. But if it's me, I'd much rather take a chance on him than Stroud. I mean, because I mean, Stroud at best case scenario probably gets you to a point where he's middle of the league as far as like top 12, top 15. That's probably, in my opinion, that's his ceiling. I don't think, maybe top 10, maybe top 10. He may come out there and do that. But Richardson, he could be literally one of the best 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the NFL if he reaches that potential. And I've always talked about, when we're setting floor and we're setting ceilings, especially when we're trying to evaluate these players and we're dealing with this gray area, well, the floor's higher for a guy who can use his legs. Because if all else fails, at least I've got a guy who has this special quality that is going to translate in the NFL. Obviously, we see what people who have legs in the NFL, quarterbacks right now, Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, all of these guys. Hadn't had a chance to even see Trey Lance because he's been hurt. But all of these guys who have these legs, Lamar, well, they have the ability, even when it's early on in their career and things aren't going, perfectly and it's out of structure, they still are able to move the chains and use their feet early on in their career. And then a lot of times what's happening, especially with like Jalen Hurts, now his arm is caught up to his physical ability with his legs. And these teams are like, oh my God, what do we do now? Like, do we run after him? Do we go with the backhand or what?
I'll tell you too, man, Philly right now, and I know this for a fact, Philly is kicking themselves in the butt because they didn't trade up into the first and they don't have that 5th-year option on a guy like that.
Exactly.
They really are. And the thing about mobile quarterbacks too, and if anybody's interested, go follow Zach Hicks. He just released a great article on this as well. But the way the league's trending with a mobile quarterback like that, it dictates how defenses have to play you in the passing game as well. So you're going to have guys that are much more open, much more, space-driven offenses now, to where you're getting guys into spaces because you have that +1 quarterback. And you're not playing, because whenever you're playing offense with a pocket passer, you're playing 10 on 11. Yeah. Because they don't have to worry about you from the pocket and stuff like that. Whenever you have a +1 quarterback right now, or you're defending all 11 guys on offense, because you cannot take your eye off of the quarterback because he will gash you. And that's such a big element of where this league is heading now, and how offenses are attacking this, this too high, single high, middle field open coverages that, that they're basically running at this point. And it's just, it's hard for me with the way things are trending to not look at a guy like Anthony Richardson and say, with the way this league's headed, I don't think his floor is honestly that low. Like, we've heard it all, if you're not the prototypical passer, or if you don't have these gaudy numbers where you're throwing, 50 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, well, he's just too raw. He doesn't have that ability. I don't think that's true anymore. And we've seen mobile quarterbacks hit at such a high rate lately in the league that I think they are the future, and the future is now. And if you don't have a guy like that, you are behind. You are playing catch up.
I agree 100%. And also, I mean, he has 2 skills that you can't teach. He has the ability to use his legs and his arm. I mean, like that's the check. I mean, when you're going through and you're looking at a guy, you're like, I mean, he has 2 things that no matter what, no matter how good a guy is, no matter how much he does film study, you can't make a guy have an arm if he doesn't have an arm. You can't make a guy be that physically gifted if he's just not naturally physically that gifted. It's going to be fun, man. I mean, it's going to be fun to evaluate him and just kind of see everybody dive in. Got a question for you. Now, we went ahead. Obviously, we went through Levis. We went through Young. We went through, Stroud. We went through Richardson. Who else we got, man? Who else are you watching? Who else are you kind of thinking, this guy's pretty, there's some special quality to this guy that I really am intrigued and I want to know a little bit more, might get in that first round conversation as well.
To me, it's really a guy that has grown as the process has went on, and that's Bo Nix. Now, I don't know if he's going to sneak into that first round, but he's another guy that's very similar in the vein of, he has a really good arm. I mean, it's not, that level, but he's mobile. He makes good decisions. He's able to play outside of structure, and he's able to give you stuff like that. And you're seeing that pay dividends now, even with backup quarterbacks that are coming in, like Tyler Huntley, Brock Purdy, some of these other backups that come in and they have that mobility and they're able to execute an offense because of that. And he's kind of very similar in that vein of those type of guys, where to me, he started off, he was dealing with a lot there at Auburn. Obviously, we've seen multiple guys now leave the Auburn program and immediately improve the next year. So, and now, of course, they're going through a whole coaching surge and all that kind of stuff as well. So he dealt with a lot of issues there at Auburn and a lot of stuff that wasn't really played in his favor. He goes to Oregon, and he had one of the best years to me out of any quarterback in the nation. And it's really been interesting to see, which he hasn't declared officially, so I don't know. Penix was another guy that I was really kind of curious about as well to watch more of. He decided to go back to school. There's a lot of chatter about a guy like Tanner McKee with Stanford, who dealt with, once again, just an absolutely horrendous situation out there in Stanford. But he has some tools to work with. He's not a mobile guy. He's much more of a pocket passer, but he's
hate him as a prospect. Absolutely hate him. But I get it. It's going to be there all. I mean, if you listen to PFF at all, they are super high on him. I don't like it. That's just me being selfish when it comes to Tanner. But I didn't mean to cut you off there. But I absolutely don't like him. But the Bo Nix is interesting. If he does declare, kind of a little bit interested in the fact that Michael Penix Jr. he didn't declare to go this year. Almost felt like he would, just because of all the injury history that he's had in the past. You thought, wow, when's this kid's stock ever going to be higher? But he's going to bet on himself. Good for him, going back, he had a hell of a season. I mean, he really did. And great. Probably would have been in that discussion, I mean,
with the medicals, I think that's kind of what was holding him back, and what he was banking on is if he can show another year of staying healthy. I mean, there's a guy, he's got 3 knee surgeries now already in his young career. So I think if he came out this year, that would be a big red flag. You're probably looking at a guy that would go in the middle rounds. If he comes back out next year and does what he did again this year, he could sneak into the first round. And so I think that's really smart of him to bet on himself. And plus, that's a really talented team next year as well. They have a chance to make a lot of noise out there. So I kind of understand why he would want to go back, but I'm curious to see how some of these other guys. Clayton Tune is another guy that
Yeah.
I've really been watching a lot of lately. He's a mid tier prospect, probably going in that 5th round, 6th round area. That he shows that he doesn't have the greatest arm, he doesn't have the greatest accuracy, but once again, he's a guy that can create outside of structure when things break down. And while you're developing those pocket skills of the quarterbacks of years past, you have that to fall back on. So, I think the success of a guy like Brock Purdy this year is only going to, I guess,
elevate that.
When it comes to stuff like this, teams are copycats. They are. They see what's successful in the league, and they want to copy that method. So you're going to see a lot more of these guys that maybe are kind of raw as passers, or maybe they don't have the strongest arms or anything like that, but they're mobile guys that can create outside of structure. And teams are going to take some late round shots on these guys and hope that one of these guys hits. So those are both guys. I think Bo Nix is a little bit better than a late round prospect. He's more of like a 2nd, 3rd round guy to me if he does end up declaring. But guys like Clayton Tune or DTR, Thompson Robinson, these are guys that, because of that rushing upside they have, it kind of lowers their, or not lowers, but it kind of ups their ceiling a little bit. So teams are more willing to take shots on guys like that late and develop those passing skills, because if you are able to develop that passing and you just have that God-given ability to create outside of structure and run the ball at an effective level, I mean, these are lottery tickets.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, and when you scratch that lottery ticket off, give me Anthony Richardson on that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, you might hit, sorry, not a winner, or you might hit $3 million. You don't ever know. But I think there's, with the way, like I said, with the way the league's headed, today, it's almost the story of the haves and the have-nots. And you either have a guy like that, or you don't, and you're playing catch up, and you're having to build a basically perfect roster around the other guys. So,
yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I just think the way, no matter who we select, he needs to be mobile, in my opinion. I mean, I just think he just needs to have that element of the game. I think the game's gotten too good. If we're being honest, they're dropping back all of these extra corners now. It's just so hard to pass. They're getting home faster. It's just hard to ask for that line to hold up that long with those, immobile quarterbacks, just standing back there like a statue. Much to talk about as this goes along. Quarterback's going to be the hot topic as we go down the line. Landon, hey, man, I want to thank you so much for hopping on. We're going to do it again, and we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it again. I mean, that's just how it goes when you're diving into this stuff like that. But love to have you back around the corner. And until next time, and I'd say this too, guys. This is a very early, raw, initial evaluation. I think there's going to be a lot left on the table when it comes to that. We're going to see the combine. We're going to see all of that stuff, as well as have a chance to dive into more tape. And then we'll really come down, and that's why I didn't want to do like a top 5 right now, because it's just a group of really good prospects, and eventually they're all going to fit when it's time for them to fit. So until next time, thank you guys so much for hopping on. And as always, go Colts.